Welcome and good afternoon. We're so excited to have you all to join us for today's conversation, Tearing the Paper Ceiling, Supporting Implementation in the Public Sector. There's been so much excitement and buzz around skills-based practices in the public sector and its potential. Today, we are energized to hear about all the work that's going on to making this transition to skills in hiring and advancement practices. We're honored to be joined by our partners at the Volcker Alliance and some amazing states, including Massachusetts, New Jersey, and California. And so on behalf of Opportunity at Work, we're really excited to have you, and we'll be turning it over to our partner, Sarah, to kick us off. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Blair. Let's see. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, I'm Sarah Mogilescu. I'm the president of the Volcker Alliance. And for those of you who don't know what the Volcker Alliance is, we're a nonprofit, and our mission is to empower the public sector to solve the challenges facing our nation. This is because our founder, Paul Volcker, and now our team believe really strongly that our democracy's vitality depends on people working in public service. And unfortunately, as you'll hear a little bit more about today, and I'm sure many of you know already, vacancy rates in state and local governments are extraordinarily high. To maintain services, to provide services that we all depend on, governments urgently need to attract talent. And this is a nonpartisan issue. People from both sides of the political aisle realize that the talent crisis is critical, and that skills-based hiring offers an opportunity for us to address it. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the early adapters of skills-based hiring in the public sector, and thinking about what kinds of experiences they've had, what brought them to this table, what's working, what's hard, and hopefully we'll leave you with some excitement around the promise of this endeavor, which is moving and advancing skills-based hiring in the public sector, but also thinking about ways that you might be helped by this growing community of practitioners that are working in this space and moving together. So I am going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. I will say that if you have a question, please don't hesitate to enter it using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer all the questions that we can, and you need not wait until the end to put a question in the Q&A function. But I would like to start by just asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and to say what has interested you in your state, I guess I should say, in skills-based hiring. Chair Myers, do you want to start and talk a little bit about New Jersey and who you are and what brings you here?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Allison Chris Myers, and I'm the chairperson of the New Jersey Civil Service Commission. And what brings us here today is a little less than a year ago, our agency underwent a thorough review of all of our job specifications that are used in state and local government. And for those job specifications, that as part of the requirements required a general bachelor's degree, we prioritized skills-based substitutions above the requirement for a general bachelor's degree as part of our job specification recruiting efforts, in order to try to attract those individuals that may not necessarily have a general bachelor's degree, but have specific substitutable experience that they could use to qualify for the position. And why we're doing this, we're looking to kind of break the glass ceiling for some of our non-professional and paraprofessional job seekers out there that may not have had the opportunity to attend a college institution, but have certainly demonstrate skills that are relatable and necessary for our positions within state government. The Civil Service Commission essentially is a testing agency providing tools for our partners in state and local government to make hiring decisions. And how we provide those tools is we examine based on candidates' knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform, to demonstrate successful performance in a potential job. So what skills-based hiring helps us do is not only recruit a wider berth of individuals, but also is instrumental and sort of baked into our process begins with, because everything we do is based on an assembled examination. And we need to know those knowledge, skills, and abilities. This just really expands our applicant opportunity population for talent that's out there that may have been untapped for years.
Thank you. Commissioner McHugh, can I call you Jeff? Or would you like to, would that be all right?
You certainly can. Thank you.
All right, welcome. And would you tell us a little bit, just introduce yourself, say what you
Sure.
do in your state, and please do explain your state's interest in skills-based hiring and what brings you here to this conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks very much for allowing me to join, talk a little bit about Massachusetts and to learn from my colleagues and from the questions we'll receive today. It's always great to work with the Opportunity at Work folks. My name is Jeff McHugh. I'm privileged to serve as the Commissioner of the Department of Transitional Assistance here in Massachusetts. It's actually my second run as Commissioner. I served in this role from 2015 to 2019. A couple months before the pandemic, I took on the role of Chief Human Resources Officer here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and returned back to this role at Transitional Assistance just this past summer. The Department of Transitional Assistance is really the agency in Massachusetts charged with working with low-income folks across our Commonwealth in helping folks to secure benefits such as supplementary nutrition assistance programs to promote food security among our citizens, our clients, and also to offer cash assistance with the goal of helping people move along the continuum to economic independence and financial security for themselves and their families. So that's what we do here in the Commonwealth. I had the opportunity to work with Opportunity at Work in a few different venues. When I was Chief Human Resources Officer, especially during the pandemic, we were in an incredible state of hurt, like many of you probably within the sound of my voice, around filling vacancies. And Massachusetts is a venue that actually went through a process similar to the process that was referenced by Chair Myers in New Jersey. We went back to a process as far back as 2016 and effectively removed bachelor's levels requirements in lieu of experiential substitutions back for about 80% of our jobs. But it's only since last January 25th, our new governor, Governor Healy, signed an executive order effectively putting some oomph behind the issue of skill-based hiring and really requiring all agencies within our executive branches to be able to not only look beyond educational requirements in filling jobs, but actually, really get laser focused on looking at the qualities that candidates can put in front of us to be successful in our jobs. It's especially important to me now as Commissioner of the Department of Transitional Assistance. Our caseload, both on the food security and cash assistance side, has increased by about 50% since pre-pandemic times. We are hurting for staff. To me, this is a match made in heaven in that we have an opportunity to reach out to folks. Many of them have lived experience as clients or individuals that have had to lean on services like DTA provides. They come to work with the requisite empathy, which is really the foundational skill that's required of everybody that works in our agency. And it promotes an opportunity for us really to work aggressively to address some of the obstacles that have existed for some of these folks finding work and to serve really as models and examples for individuals that are on our caseload, serving as caseworkers and effectively communicating to our clients, I did it and you can do it too. So I'm tremendously happy to participate today, field questions, and Sarah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Deputy Secretary Regan, can I call you James?
Oh, James is fine, yeah.
Okay, James, would you share a little bit about what your role is, what you do, and what California's thinking is so far, or why is it coming to the skills-based hiring conversation?
Yeah, thank you everyone for having me. I'm James Regan. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Workforce Development here in state of California. So me and the team, we work with departments across state government to support recruitment, hiring, and learning and development for the state government workforce in California. And of course, that includes taking a long, hard look at our hiring process and practices, and building on a lot of the things that my fellow panelists mentioned already. Is how can we use state government employment as a mechanism for economic mobility and financial independence, especially in a way that makes it so that the huge portions of the workforce that have tons of skills and knowledge to offer are not, for some reason, automatically disqualified because they happen to not have a degree. And so really looking at that in California over the past few years, and still having that value for certain professions of that higher education, while also recognizing that that shouldn't be necessary for the vast majority of roles that we offer in state government. And looking at how do we have that experience and competency-based way of assessing whether an applicant has that ability to do a wide variety of positions with us, even without higher education, because it's not necessary. And so there has been, over the past few years, a large assessment, I'm using that word loosely, but essentially just an ongoing effort to take a look at our minimum qualifications that we use to assess someone's readiness for different positions, and removing unnecessary barriers to entry-level positions in particular, and even journey-level positions across the state. And the governor of California also had signed an executive order to use Jeff's term, to put some oomph behind the effort here in California as well. And so it's a really exciting thing where we're also partnering with a variety of our labor partners across the state to look at how do we do this holistically in sort of a master plan for career education in general. That includes positions and career opportunities that don't require higher education. So I will stop there, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Would you, and I guess maybe all of you can just nod or shake your heads to this question. Is skills-based hiring a big sea change for your state? Do you feel like it marks a big change in practice?
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Okay, and so following on to that, because it's a different way of approaching hiring and thinking about screening, and some of the questions that are coming in are talking about assessing competencies. Can you talk about, and maybe we can start with you, Jeff, can you talk about some of the actions your state has taken to make sure that you can pave the way for this new change in practice? Like what are the concrete steps that you've started with?
Sure, Sarah. I would say this. I do see it, especially even with the fact that we had taken a very intentional path back in 2016, 2017 to revisit our job descriptions. This initiative, with the governor signing an executive order back in January, I think was critical to really reinforce what was behind this, and to set in motion the kind of outcomes that people were trying to achieve in implementing a comprehensive skills-based hiring program across the Commonwealth. This has come out, and while it's still fairly new to the Commonwealth since January, a lot of emphasis. We did, James referenced this, I think, in terms of working with the union partners. I think the governor's office did a terrific job in terms of processing this through our unions and getting the unions on board with this, which was a really smart prerequisite to make sure that labor was strongly in the corner of this. Labor's certainly in the business of seeing us fill some of these unfilled jobs. They certainly have some skin in the game with respect to that, but they're strongly behind that. This has come with some completely revisiting some of the training programs that have gone into our hiring. The Commonwealth is
Before
actually.
you leave the unions, though, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before you leave the unions, did this require any renegotiation of collective bargaining agreements, or was it just communications based?
Our job descriptions are subject to renegotiation. However, we were able to secure some blanket understandings with unions that have allowed us to go in and effectively do that. That was, there was a little bit of a bump back in 2016, 17, but nothing in this most recent version really required us to do it. Job descriptions themselves are mandatory subjects to bargaining with our unions, but we were able to kind of clear that hurdle. And again, having the unions all in the corner was really, really important around this, especially at a time where they're so heavily invested. We have a number of people that, are working straight out. We have a number of people working inordinate amounts of overtime. And, I have to remind my managers that overtime isn't just a vehicle for folks receiving more money. It's really a built-in penalty against the employers for not having enough people on board. And it's really about, moving and filling some of those key items. One thing I would just want to mention, Sarah, is why the training piece and why like some of the post-audit work and looking at some of the hiring and evaluating outcomes and reporting against this is important, is that it's pretty clear to me that you just can't snap your fingers or even sign an executive order and put skill-based hiring in place and you're done. There is a fair amount of implicit bias that goes on around hiring. Many of our folks who are hiring now, and this is a real obstacle that has to be addressed, worked hard to secure degrees that they felt were critical to them securing their jobs in the first place. Some of them are still paying off student loans that were endemic to that as well. So getting to a point of really getting folks to understand the process and moving past that is critically important to be able to make sure that we have the program in place. Sorry to go on so long.
No, that's great, but you're talking about training of existing staff and sort of the cultural work that needs to go hand in hand with this.
Revisiting the hiring process, doing some evaluation around hires, do some spot pieces to make sure that in fact the candidate pools do reflect the individuals that we want to have and don't see people restricted from being in candidate pools due to the absence of a degree.
Chair Myers, from you're at a different perspective, you're coming from a different stakeholder vantage point at the Civil Service Commission. What kind of concrete actions can you take from there to help sort of pave the way, make implementation of skills-based hiring more possible and probable?
I think Jeff hit the nail on the head. A big part of it is the education out there, because there is this very real sense that folks with titles we call them professional titles in New Jersey that require at a minimum a bachelor's degree. Okay. And folks feel very strong that this is something they worked hard for, that they've earned, and that an interloper may be coming in who didn't kind of go through that ritual and that training to advance into these types of positions. So the biggest thing for us is the education, but we're sort of lucky in New Jersey in a lot of ways, because for years, our state had what we call a substitution clause for education for professional and paraprofessional titles. And when Jeff and James talk about putting the executive order, putting the oomph into this, that's really what it did for us. So prior to our executive order, if a professional title in the job specification, it would say a bachelor's degree plus this many years of experience. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have a degree, the language was education could be substituted on a year-for-year basis on the basis of 30 semester hour credits equaling 1 year of experience. And that was just like a general throw line at the bottom of the job specification. So what we were finding is people were self-selecting out before they ever got to whatever even the requirements were, because they would just see that bachelor's degree and that was it. So they would just not even go forward. So a big part of it was shifting how we present our job specifications out there initially. And then after we completed that task, exactly what Jeff shared happened. There was a little bit of kickback. Wait, what are you dumbing down the job? And we had to go through, and it's still an ongoing task actually to do this, to keep this education and knowledge going. So it's like, no, I mean, you can still obtain eligibility by possessing the degree. What we're saying is this type of experience for this type of position is also just as significant, because when it gets down to the classification of the position, what we're looking for is to eliminate artificial barriers to performance of the job. And that's really what skills-based assessment does. Practical on the ground skills to do things are can be much more valuable than walking out of college with a 4-year degree and having no professional work experience or work experience, say, in an office. So we're looking to try to communicate these equivalencies out there to our job-seeking public to ensure that folks don't feel shortchanged on the one hand, but to recognize the value of these skills on the other. So we're still looking forward to that harmony, and we're going through, I think, what would be the normal types of steps doing this. We've updated our specs. We've communicated this out through our job announcements. The staff here that review applications that come in, and we take applications to take tests. Okay. We've had to retrain the way our folks look at experience indicated on application to look for these skill-based measures instead of just, okay, I've worked in this type of office for X years and I have a degree, and just not rely on the degree so much, and to kind of look, we had to redefine what professional general experience is, for example, as an aid for our assessors, to make sure that they credited that experience. Because in the past, if an individual is coming from, say, a clerical or a paraprofessional background, the litmus test was, well, how could you have professional equivalent experience that would substitute for a degree when you've only worked in positions, in our mind, that are paraprofessional or clerical? So you could say everything you needed to say as far as skills, but we still wouldn't take it based on this sort of academic application that we were using. And so part of it was training our staff on how to kind of get out of 116 years of how we looked at things internally, just for determining examination eligibility.
Well, you've both now, the last two responses have talked about just sort of, and I talked about a sea change. You have to really start to think about different ways people understand common, what the status quo looks like now, right? So there's the internal training and the culture for folks who are peers or soon to be peers of the job applicants that we're talking about. Then there's also the external communications about what is an equivalency. Why does equivalency matter? Thinking about that word, and this thing might mean something too, and we're not diminishing its meaning, but this thing might mean
Exactly.
same thing, and that's a different kind of training. James, can you speak a little bit to the types of roles where you found that skill-based hiring was most helpful to your recruitment efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first one that comes to mind is we have an entry level analyst role. It's a generalist role. It's a business analyst. It's used widely across almost every department in California state government. And that was one that there was realignment to remove some higher education requirements recently, actually about a year ago. And also hearing, I think, about the idea of flipping the actual job posting so that as someone is reading through, there is different sort of the experience-based way of qualifying is at the top, and then there would still be a four-year degree way of qualifying towards the bottom instead of the opposite. Also, it was kind of an exercise in design thinking, and I love that Chair Myers mentioned that because we went through something similar where we saw a difference. But I think it was looking at roles like that entry-level analyst, where someone could have easily have the skills and knowledge to do the job successfully through prior experience, and we open the door. It's about opening doors. And then the challenge then was to generate the awareness around that opportunity because the qualifiers had changed. And so I will say, in a nutshell, one of the biggest things that we've been focusing on is the communications to the public and potential applicants on a broad scale after a requirement like that has changed. Has been one of the biggest pushes, and it's not always easy. It's not always easy trying to reach grassroots community members about even, and what is sometimes for us, it's a big change in the way we're looking at hiring, but it's a small change in the website. And so how do you make it so that there's awareness around that new opportunity that maybe wasn't as clear or didn't exist before? And so I know I went off a little bit, but I think it's all interrelated, really. The way we're looking at it is that it's all interrelated. You have that change, and it may generate the potential for more applicants and greater diversity and breadth of applicants. But that's not going to happen unless you also have the training internally for the hiring managers and you have the awareness campaign for potential applicants. It kind of all goes together in a package, at least. It's sort of the way we're thinking about it in California.
So, and Jeff, can you also speak, because I know when in your introductory remarks, you were talking about a particular skill gap that you were trying to fill. And how did did you lose degree requirements? Did you change the job descriptions, and what positions were you talking about or looking for there?
Our jobs did not have specific degree requirements, and I'm talking specifically for like our caseworkers, and some of our customer-facing kind of client service roles with the Department of Transitional Services. However, I think James and Chair Myers have referenced this, I think, specifically. I think our practice has been, and I'll look even at like some of our technology systems. When you posted a job here in the Commonwealth, you could post a job and the job could have no specific 4-year educational requirement or specific degree requirement. However, you have the capacity as a hiring manager to put in like preferred qualifications. And one of the preferred qualifications could be a master's degree in physics, and effectively screen out anybody else that may not look and feel like you, or may not meet your expectations of what it needs to be successful in the job. And I think in some ways we practiced that. We had the flexibility ahead of us, but and sometimes just, people got through the front door, but they didn't necessarily get in the interview pool. And they certainly didn't get into selection. And so we, at the start of this, we looked at our caseworkers. And again, I reference this as like a key area of focus for us. Before we started, looking back as far back as January, and the executive order was identified, about 20% of our caseworkers, and we've got about 1,500 of them here at DTA, about 20% of our caseworkers at one time had been a recipient of our services. So these are individuals, and I think that's a lowball number. That's what we were able to identify through our computer systems of more recent people. And our agency is all about disrupting multi-generational poverty. And so we want more people to be able to come in to serve as role models, to have that, really relevant and energetic empathy, toward clients, and be able to kind of spread that messaging around that. Not everybody coming through our door is necessarily somebody who's received benefits before, but many folks who've not had the capacity to be able to go on to 4-year schools may come from an environment where they can identify and certainly meet the needs around this. One other area that we really hope to be especially successful is that we don't have a terrific track record, and I'm not proud of this, but don't have a terrific track record of being seen as an employer of choice for veterans. And we're really looking to use this as a vehicle for folks that may have gone into the service right out of high school and come back and are really looking for meaningful employment. My experience in working with veterans in the workforce has always been a real positive one, and I see it as something that can really bolster our workforce, as well as making us an employer of choice for people that we have an obligation to already. So
what's interesting is, and there's a couple of questions in the Q&A that are about assessing skills. And what I'm hearing, though, is that a big push of this is the equivalency point that Chair Myers made earlier, but that you're trying to not just make the degree the only criteria. It's not necessarily about assessing a skill capacity than it is opening a door to more people. Is that an accurate characterization, you think, of the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. And I would tell you, I've worked most of my professional life in the HR arena, largely within the human services world. And what I tend to defer to, and again, I would say our jobs are not within civil service. They're not. Most of the jobs that are exam driven in Massachusetts tend to be more public service jobs than some of the jobs that I've been describing. But so these are largely like the unassembled jobs that are covered by union and people to have, the criteria for selection and the grievance for non-selection is largely controlled through our collective bargaining agreements. But this provides an opportunity for us to come in and actually do a different kind of hiring. Bring people in, put them into like unassembled situations, do situational hiring to talk about, provide them with a scenario. Like they're sitting across the table from a client and the client asks a question, or the client behaves a certain way, or the client exhibits a reluctance to share information. What would you do? And it's really puts people in real life situations that are so transferable to the workplace that it really helps us to make smart decisions. We're not looking at the degree, we're looking at how people will perform in certain situations that are relevant to our jobs.
Skill-based hiring got its start in the private sector and has made significant inroads there. What is hard about implementing skill-based hiring in the public sector? Or what is harder? What has been hard? And what are some strategies that you have tapped into to navigate public sector challenges? I don't know who would like to speak to that. I know it's a hard question.
So I think for New Jersey, Sarah, is at least for our competitive titles, which are most of the titles in our state classification plan, the thinking always is, well, we'll do the skills-based assessment during the examination. And that's where the rubber hits the road. The problem was we were kind of screening out people that if they wanted the test, they may have done very well by exhibiting that in an actual competitive situation. You know, much like the structured interview process that Jeff was talking about, where there's maybe like real life situations and there's anchored responses to questions or possible courses of action. If you're not getting anybody to the door to be able to even take the test, you've lost like a significant portion of your potential talent pool by doing that. So the largest thing with us was kind of getting over that cultural, we've got to let these people into the test, and how do we do that? And that really started with how we internally screen for eligibility to take the test. Now, New Jersey also has a number of non-competitive career service titles, and those individuals are assessed by the specific state hiring agency. And what we're trying to do is partner with some of our sister agencies to basically have a formalized function, such as Massachusetts, in order to glean out those skills, like in an oral interview process, or some positions are just very easy. The position may need possession of a plumber's inspector license, you know, so those skills have already been assessed by another agency, and we can just use the licensure as the skills. For years, we had problems with kind of general titles that did that, where we didn't call them like a preferred skill. It was, well, if a position was used in amusements, you needed a carnival licensure. But if this inspector position was used for high-rise inspection, you needed a two-story license for inspector license issued by DCA, but the base title was always the same, right? So it came down to us in those situations, kind of taking a looking at the specific skills associated with the licensure required for the position, or in IT, maybe a specific type of software or programming language that may be unique to that position that's out there. And we've done skills assessments for those for our IT folks. And we had different sputters and starts with this through the years, because what we're finding is a lot of our general titles weren't really getting lists that gleaned candidates for those specific skill sets that they needed. So we were struggling to try to find a way to okay, well, we'll do like a self skills assessment. Okay, you're an IT person, but you are proficient in these 3 languages. And, we started that process years ago, actually. And it kind of went in and out of favor based on our some of the issues that we had with our bargaining partners over the years. But it's really making a full circle back, because this is the way of the future, and our partners do realize this, because they definitely have skin in this game too. And I hope that answers the question, at least from the Jersey side.
And I saw, James, you had also begun to lose your mute button, which in terms of public sector implementation, what might be something that's been harder, and how have you surmounted that challenge?
Yeah, I think that, as probably everyone on this webinar knows very, very well, the civil service merit-based process is designed for fairness. And that means standards that are rigid to try and prevent different interpretations of the same requirement, and so that every candidate is evaluated fairly and consistently against the same criteria. And so when you have a shift like this, it takes a lot of effort to share the idea that skills-based hiring practice or competency-based exam practice is not going to introduce that subjective review.
Yep.
Instead of an objective review that the merit-based process is based on.
Yep.
And so I think that that is the challenge that maybe doesn't exist as much in private sector, and it makes it more difficult for us as part of government entities, is essentially trying to convince all of our partners that this will not result in unfairness or biased review, because inherently skills are harder to assess compared to something that's administratively cleaner to prove, like a degree. And so that, in a nutshell, to me, has been our experience in California. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just takes a little extra effort to ensure that it's done in a way that doesn't introduce inconsistency in the review process.
Who takes the lead on that in who has taken the lead on that in California? How have you, I mean, that's hard work. Where does it come from? Who's the main mover?
I think it's a team effort. Quite frankly, I think it is a combination of the State Personnel Board in California, as well as our Department of Human Resources, as well as government operations agency, as well as the governor's office, right? It's kind of it's a culture change first, and that's always the hardest. And so with support at each levels of the organization and the heavy evaluation and planning work being done by our State Personnel Board and Department of Human Resources in partnership with one another, as well as our labor partners, I think I guess the short version of the answer to your question is there isn't necessarily like one entity that is responsible for doing this. I think it's multiple, and that's also why I think in the past it's been difficult, is because it takes an overwhelming amount of coordination sometimes in building those partnerships and making sure all the partners necessary to make the change are comfortable with it.
Can I just add, Sarah, and I think I'm channeling James and Chair Myers a bit on this, and saying this for the benefit of folks on the webinar that may be on the cusp or maybe seeing in their future moving to a skill based hiring model. What we're seeing, I think, early on in Massachusetts is like this issue of subjectivity doesn't raise its head nearly as much for hires that we're doing for people that are coming in from off the street, or external hires that are coming into the workplace. Where I'm seeing it probably more acutely is when people are pursuing promotional opportunities. And these are folks that kind of grew up in our work environment with one set of rules, and now there's a new set of rules, and they're probably more suspect of subjectivity in the process. It really, it's going to take a village to get past this, and it's not going to happen overnight. In terms of, it's looking at the questions we ask, it's looking at our evaluation sheets and how we really evaluate and try to codify some of the skills that we hold most valuable in these jobs. Doing the work up front to really articulate the skills that are most relevant and most appropriate to the job content that we're talking about. And involving as many people in the interview process to be able to drive a consensus that is both appropriate and defensible. And I think that is necessary in the process.
And Jeff, am I understanding though that there is, if you're just starting out, is it easier to sort of pick a position that isn't going to create as much controversy like what you're describing?
No, I think it's just generally, I don't think folks are as marinated in the historical process that as some of our internal folks are, and have secured promotional opportunities in the past and are continuing their career. I think folks that are coming in off the street as their first maybe their first or limited forays into applying for state service. So they're maybe not feeling it as much as it relates to that. So I think it's more of a vantage point.
Question for any of you that have, or maybe the answer is you haven't, are you tracking post-hiring outcomes? Are you looking at retention, post-hire promotion, success, et cetera?
The Civil Service Commission's not, because it's actually a highly decentralized system that we use. And I don't know if any of our sister agencies are doing that with the tools that we give them. But as an employer, we haven't done it, but we haven't. And I think this kind of goes to where Jeff was saying, we're a very senior agency here. Once you kind of come to civil service in New Jersey, folks tend to stay to the actual Department of Civil Service. So, but if some of our sister agencies do that, they may very well.
Well, we're certainly tracking, recruitment, retention, certainly looking at what this does with diversity, our workforce composition models, things along those lines. What we haven't, I think, been able to capture specifically is trying to codify how different it is under the current environment versus what it was before the executive order, and to identify folks that are coming in with a degree for jobs that previously held out some kind of degree requirement versus now. But that is something we intend to track on this, to really look at. I think a lot of us have high expectations that this will have a significant impact in terms of our workforce diversity, filling vacancies, reducing overtime, and improving retention, and just in general, improving the workforce culture. So we want to be able to, track as much of that as we can going forward.
James, are you guys tracking?
Yes, at an enterprise level, we are tracking the differences in the ability to fill positions and the retention and churn of particular civil service job types that we recently went through a change in the minimum qualifications. I think we're working on getting more and more granular over time as well, because it would be great to be able to track the overall job success. That is more difficult. I think as Chair Myers mentioned, in California, our state government it's a federated model. Each department has their own ability to recruit and hire. They have their own culture and sort of performance standards in some cases. So getting that department by department experience takes a little bit more time to be able to measure, but it's something we're working towards.
And it may be something, you guys are early adopters, and that over time, as your analysis or your information is documented and perhaps to be found on the Public Service Hub, the public base, we can all learn from what you're learning, since you have been at it a little bit longer. So I'm fascinated to see what you're finding in terms of workforce composition and
Sarah, this isn't sophisticated analytics, but I can
Yeah.
just tell you early on since January, the
Yeah.
number of people that are coming and banging at our door wanting to work for the Commonwealth. And there's a number of factors. We have a relatively new governor who has brought a lot of energy to the Commonwealth. There's a number of policies that she has brought in that I think make the Commonwealth a more attractive place to work. But we're just seeing a higher number of people vying for our jobs. So, and quite honestly, that's a big indicator for us.
It is.
So,
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Well, so we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I'm hopeful that each one of you can kind of give a piece of advice to government leaders that are on the webinar and that are just starting out on this journey, something that you wish you had known when you were just beginning this process. What should they know? What do you advise? Who wants to start?
I keep hearing what James was talking about with the the uniform process that we kind of fall back on because it's safe, actually. And we don't want to treat anybody differently than another applicant. That's really the challenge that we have. And at least in New Jersey for competitive titles, it doesn't get you the job. It doesn't even necessarily get you the interview. It only gets you to the test. So if the test does its job and there's more people taking the test, it's competitive and more competition's good, right? So at least we have that going for us. But I think the problem in New Jersey with that is 93% of our competitive examinations are evaluations of education and experience. It's not an actual, you go to a testing center and you demonstrate your knowledge, skills, and abilities in an assembled testing methodology. So what happens is you get to what James was talking about is you can kind of modify, and we're just reading your application and applying that to a standardized scoring methodology. So that's one of the things. So if our requirements indicate that you need a year of clerical experience, which includes typing, you don't say that you type on your papers. We don't credit you with experience for it. And we don't credit you for examination scoring purposes on it because of that. You got to meet the announced requirements, and we got to treat every applicant the same. So you never really get a chance as an applicant to demonstrate in a competitive situation in an assembled test making format what you could do because of the testing methodology that we use most of the time. So one of the things that we are doing to try to deal with that is we want to actually move more into assembled testing, which is another challenge in itself. But we believe that really the only way skills-based assessments is going to work for us is to get more people in the door and let them demonstrate in an assembled testing environment what their, the levels of their knowledge, skills, and abilities in a competitive situation, which we're required to do under New Jersey law. So I would be careful. If I had my druthers, I wish we could just do all assembled tests, and we're looking for methodologies to do this. It takes a long time. We almost write it when we do that 7% of assembled testing. It's like we write a new test every time. So we're looking at the psychometrics to see if can we do battery testing? Can you take one series of examinations that test for these skills, and then you can bank that you've already been tested and then apply them to future announcements.
So
Those types of,
yeah, so there's all kinds of getting the assessment piece is complicated. And also you noted the applicants being, the outreach to applicants to help them describe their experience in ways that are consistent with the changes you're making is also very important.
exactly. We just our agency sponsored a job fair today, and one of the things that doing agency sponsored job fairs for our sister agencies and our local government partners is sort of a new thing for New Jersey. But one of the things that we're doing as part of this fair is we're having specific breakout courses for the folks that come in that instruct them how to do this. We had 3 different sessions just on what you said, Sarah, because you need to tell us what you do, what your skills are, and how they relate to the requirements.
Right.
If they're, the substitutable experience requirements or not, because we want to capture all your skills to make sure that at least in that methodology, until we get to a more psychometrically valid instrument at a higher percentage of the time, we want to make sure we capture and can give you the best assessment we can based on what you can do for us.
Right. So
Not,
we're at the top of the hour, so I just, James and Jeff, if you would just one piece of advice to leaders embarking on this journey, just one piece, James.
Yeah, I would say just have your value proposition ready. It might sound like a cop-out answer, but
Yeah.
I think that's been one of the things in my experience in California is filling vacancy rates is great. But I think the real reason why we're doing it and remembering why is to lift people up. Like, we're here to lift people up. That's why government exists. And having the value proposition where it's about connecting with people, it's about promoting opportunities that didn't exist before for a huge portion of the working population and future generations. There are so many ways to sort of develop that value proposition to get buy-in. And I think by not starting with that, it would put you at a disadvantage. And so I think that's my piece of advice very quickly.
Yeah.
I would say amen, James, on that. And I also would say that.
Oh, we've lost your sound. There you go.
Am I back?
Yep.
Yeah. One of the things that I think as we've talked about this today, is that making this shift is not without risk. But I would just say to all of you, I believe this is a risk worth taking. And speaking as somebody who works in Massachusetts, working with an agency, the Department of Transitional Assistance, a great faith in my hiring managers who came up through the agency themselves, had a bird's eye view to seeing what it takes for people to be integral, successful in the roles of our agencies. Trust them. And I would say that's the vehicle by which we secure the value that James just articulated. So thank you.
I am so grateful to the panelists for sharing your time with us today and your experience, and for all of you that have tuned in. I too believe, and the Volcker Alliance believes, that this is something that is a very exciting moment in public sector hiring, and thinking about how we can leverage skills-based hiring to bring more people into government, and, as you say, to lift people up through their work. So it is a risk worth taking. And for those in the audience who are interested in continuing this conversation, because we've barely scratched the surface, mark your calendars, because Opportunity at Work is going to be launching the Public Sector Hub. It's Public Sector Hub on May 16th, which is going to be a place to house some of these resources, these ideas, what we're learning, so that we can help each other tackle these risks and move forward. So thank you again for your time today. We look forward to continuing the conversation and other opportunities. Thanks, Opportunity at Work, for hosting.
Thank you.
thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye now.